Brought to you by GatewayCitySavers.com.
Softli's Scouting Report, hosted by Cliff Saunders, exclusively on 101ESPN.com.
Hello and welcome on into the Week 8 edition of the Softli Scouting Report here on 101ESPN.com. Cliff Saunders alongside 101 ESPN NFL analyst Tony Softli. And this week we got the Carolina Panthers coming into town for a noon kick on Sunday. Isaac Bruce getting his jersey retired. Before we get to that, let's look back at what happened in Tampa last week and what was the one thing that you took away from the 18-17 loss to the Buccaneers.
Well, Cliff, first of all, people were talking about how that game was, slipped away from them, slipped through their hands. Well, really, in reality, that game was taken from them. They had two young teams going head-to-head. You had two young quarterbacks, two young coaches, and they just didn't play for 60 minutes. They played hard. It was kind of like a Dr. and Jekyll and Mr. Hyde type situation where they played good in the first half, didn't play hard in the second half. So they've got to learn to finish games off. They've got to learn to be competitive for 60 minutes. It's a young football team, and that's some of the growing pains that these guys are going to have to endure.
Tony, Carolina finally cracks the win column. They beat San Francisco late in the game last week. What did you see in the Panthers that you had not seen before in this season?
Well, it's not so much in the season. You go back to last year, the last 8 games, Matt Moore was very consistent in his play. He was leading this team. He was actually playing above his head, and now he's back. He got benched. He's back as a starter. Last week he threw for 301 yards. You got to keep in mind with this young quarterback, he's young too as well in the starting role. 7 of his 11 starts have been wins. So this guy's capable of doing it. The consistent play at quarterback is what helped those guys win last week, and they're going to come into this dome looking for their second victory.
You brought up Matt Moore. What does he bring to the table?
The thing I like about him is he has size, he has arm strength, he's got good accuracy. He can squeeze it into the window, and that's where 2 defenders are closing in on a wide receiver. He can put it right in the middle there or put it down low where only the receiver can go get it. He can do that, and he can rally the troops. He is not much of a leader. He's got to develop that package. But I'll tell you what, he has the skills to play at this level.
He started the season as Carolina's starter, benched for a little while, obviously, in favor of Jimmy Clausen. The Clausen experiment hasn't worked as of yet. Why didn't it work?
Well, he got out there, Cliff, and he was a typical rookie. He wasn't seasoned like Sam Bradford. Bradford's beyond his means like Freeman. He went out fumbling the ball, throwing interceptions, didn't really have good command of the offense, and in result, they were losing. And he needed to be replaced. Sometimes it's better to sit down and watch, then you learn more, and then you can get back out there and play again.
What kind of weapons does Moore have? I mean, we all know about Steve Smith, but over the last couple of weeks, we've started seeing some young receivers step up as well for Carolina.
Yeah, what you have in Carolina, obviously you have the Pro Bowl wide receiver in Steve Smith. He can punt return, he can return kickoffs, but he is at his best when he's running those routes and catching the ball. They also have 2 young wide receivers in Geddes from Baylor and LaFell from LSU. Both these guys are like twins. They're both very tall, 6'3", about 215. They both can run very fast, and they've been playmakers for them down the road. They have Rosario, the tight end, that's really good, and they also have Cloney, who was picked up off waivers, who's doing a very good job for him as that 3rd or 4th receiver. But don't forget about Thomas. Thomas was just picked up off waivers from Washington when they cut him. He has a 28.0 kickoff return average that's been pretty impressive, and that's been keeping these guys in these games.
And we're talking about the Carolina passing game all of a sudden, but their bread and butter is the running game, the 2-headed monster at running back, DeAngelo Williams, Jonathan Stewart. Williams banged up a little bit. If he can't go, how does that impact what they do on the ground game?
Well, I think Williams will play. I actually helped draft Williams when I was there. DeAngelo is a fine young man. And, adding Stewart the year after that, that's just like you said, a 2-headed monster. It's hard to stop. Stewart is a little bit more a slasher, where Williams is a pick and slide with explosive. He's very explosive out in open space. He'll make you chase you. He'll define angles, and he will outrun the secondary. So having both those guys healthy is dangerous. Just having one of them is hard enough to defend. Noon
kick on Sunday, of course. What are some of the matchups that we should be looking for when Carolina comes to town?
Well, I mean, obviously, it's going to be the matchup of the defensive backs. How does the Rams DBs match up with those young receivers? They're tall, they're fast. They have Steve Smith in the mix. They got a good tight end that it lines up out at the slot. He lines up out at wide receiver, and he gets into the mix as well. And then they throw to those running backs. So it's going to be up to them to stop that. And the same thing on the other side. Carolina has a very good secondary, and how they shut down Danny Amendola and how the game plan is to to go after those guys is going to be very impressive. It's going to be fun to watch. It really is.
The Rams 3-4, the bye coming up after the Carolina game. They want to get to that 4-4 mark. It's a high watershed mark for them. What's the number one thing that has to happen, Tony, if the Rams are going to win on Sunday?
Well, Cliff, I think that Sam Bradford has to take back the reins, and he's got to be in control of that helm. Steven Jackson, who's had surgery on his left pinky finger, he's going to be down a little bit. I think he's still going to play, but you know what? His production, I do believe, will be down a little bit. He's going to have to throw the ball down the field to those receivers. He's going to have to create a win through the pass this weekend.
Tony will join Randy Carricker and Rick Venturi for the pregame show Sunday at 9 a.m. on 101 ESPN. Then at noon, it's Steve Savard and DeMarco Farr with the call. Coach Jim Hannafin and I will have postgame. Tony will be along for that. And don't forget, if you're at the Jones Dome on Sunday, at about 11:30 on Sunday morning, they're going to retire Isaac Bruce's number 80. For Tony Softli, I'm Cliff Saunders. This has been the Softli Scouting Report on 101ESPN.com.